focus and intensity.
Our subject today is maximizing your efficiency.
Another wonderful episode on range fitness today, huh?
Hopefully the people that are listening will feel that way. And we hear that a lot about, it's kind of the buzz or power tagline with virtually every program or every fitness routine or whatever, like how to really maximize your gains. Your gain, not like your gains, bruh, but like whatever you're going to gain out of the modality. And there's also a lot of attention given to the two elements that make up efficiency, which are focus and intensity, how focused you are on the task at hand and the intensity that you devote to it. So since this is your wheelhouse that you're exposed to as far as the fitness routines and modalities go, but most importantly, the certainties that people are under when they begin training with you, dealing with efficiency and or focus and intensity. What are some of the common misperceptions that you see that people deal with those two things? First of all, what are they? How do you define them? And how do you try to bring people back onto that track?
It can be a game of semantics, I guess. But at the end of the day, I feel it's important to have clear definitions and clear ideas, as at least just for communication standpoint. And then we can get into the semantic trenches later and who's right and wrong on which word to use where. But for focus, for me, I really think of it's a mental aspect. It is what is my mind working on? What is my mind pondering or thinking, reaching out for into the body, as it were, especially when it comes to exercise specifically. So this could be things as far as envisioning how my body's moving in space. It could be trying to feel particular contractions in the exercise, and just having a general sense of my body throughout the movement and even after movement. Intensity.
John, that is a very approachable, absorbable definition. Seriously, that's really good. That's really relatable, because I would define focus as the measurement of how effectively distraction is avoided during the execution of a task. What?
Yeah.
The way that you said that, we said the same thing, right? They said the same thing, but the way that you said it is like relatable, and I can readily envision someone going, yeah, absolutely, exactly. And mine sounds
there's
like
other people in the world.
Mine sounds like I'm fucking trying to train an AI model or something. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, in that same vein though, right? Intensity is going to be again, how hard is it? So intensity could be, right, how much just pure weight is on the bar, or how heavy are the dumbbells that you've chosen to pick up and try to move. Intensity could be how fast you're trying to move. So something like sprints, or maybe you're doing something like a power clean, where again you're trying to be very explosive through the movement. Right. So that's a very intense movement. It could be something like plyometrics. So we're doing box jumps or bounding or some sort of sprint workout. So these things are going to be different types of intensity for it. I wouldn't necessarily intensities like chalk on your chest, or, the LeBron James of like throwing the chalk up in the air, or the sniffing salts. Like, I know those all have a way of kind of psyching one up to help them prepare for an intense effort, but that's not how I would define intensity.
Well, once again, John, that is a very
intense people.
That is a very approachable and readily integratable definition that you've given there. A lot of analogy for people to grasp onto. My definition of focus, of intensity, is the measurable amount of effort or force. Again, said the same thing.
Let's peel it back for a second. Like, spend some time trying to hash this out between the two of us. And for me, one of the first things that I went to in my nerdy way is like physics. Because when I think of focus and intensity, right, those are to me physics terms. So you can like look at focus as like the focus of a lens of a magnifying glass. So you can have a focus that's real broad and not really honed in on winning spot, and you'll just have light on a piece of paper. Or if you can really zoom in that focus, now you can burn a hole through the piece of paper, right? To your point, right? Intensity, is like the nerdy way of an equation.
There's a measurable amount
Right.
of effort or force. Yeah.
Right. And it basically boils down to power, which boils down to force, which
Actually, let's break that down for a second. What I mean when I say the measurable amount of effort or force, that's relative. So you have someone who is 10 years old and they go and try and lift a 45-pound dumbbell. Right, that's going to require a certain amount of force to be able to lift that, and they will put forth a certain amount of effort. You get an adult who is average ability or more to go and lift that same 45-pound dumbbell, and it will be the same amount of force required, but will take less effort from them. So it's relative. It's relative to where you are in your journey. But you had said something previously off camera whenever we were talking about it, and you said, I guess the way that I would make it approachable for someone in 10 seconds or less, define it all, is it's essentially, why am I here? And what am I doing while I'm here? That's perfect. That's a legit way to put that. I was so impressed by that. I wrote it down.
Thank God, because I forgot it. But I think that's an important thing, right? It's like anytime we're doing anything, right, as creatures with conscious choice, right? You show up to your job, you're there for a purpose, whether it's just to make a paycheck. Well, okay. Well, you got to do something to earn that paycheck. Even if it's just having a pulse, you got to have a pulse and be there to earn that paycheck, right? At a gym, whether it's to lose weight, whether it's to gain strength, whether it's to get muscle or have hypertrophy, whether it's to work on imbalances, whatever your reason is, right? Go there and make that hour, that 30 minutes, 15 minutes, even if it's all you got. And right, that's what we're about in that time slot.
So to make that relatable, the bullshit that's around when someone says, well, we all have the same 24-hour, fuck all that. That's not true. But we do all have the same hour that we spend in the gym, like all of us, right? If you're at the gym and you're there and you plan to spend an hour there, we all have that same hour. And when you see someone who walks up to a station, depending on how intense you are, which you can usually identify by the gallon jug of water that someone will be carrying around if they're like super intense, right? Right? Am I wrong?
It's the size of the gym bag they carry around.
Right, the size of the gym bag, or
small. How small is the shirt they're wearing?
Right, or is that polycarbonate? Is that right? That hard plastic gallon jug that they just drink straight out of with their water, and they're see them like scooping pre-workout and shit into their mouth. I'm not shitting on any of that. I'm saying like that's a type of person. You can find
it is a gym culture that is visible and
right. The person who carries around a gallon jug of water and raw dog pre-workout,
the dry
scoops, right? That person has an almost predictable degree of focus and intensity, and their workout will yield a certain expected degree of efficiency. And then you have someone who is using the gym as a distraction for what's outside the gym, which is usually marked by getting a few things done. And the way that I like to term it is when someone goes, are you looking at your phone between sets, or are you just doing sets in between looking at your phone? Because those are different things, right? That will have an expected degree of intensity and focus.
Yeah, even we peel that back for a hot second, right? Even the most rigid exercise programs, right? They'll have something between like a 30 to a 2-minute, maybe a 5-minute break if it's real heavy lifting.
If it's really, really heavy, you have to wait for the breathing to normalize.
And so to look at one's phone, I mean, even if it's a quick, like you have one of the fancy phones that looks at your face and unlocks and everything, then to find something that you want to look at, like we're talking 30 seconds is nothing.
Yeah.
And then there's the time to set up for your next effort. Like this is one of the things that I always get tripped up off for my own workouts, and I really have to be kind of a taskmaster for clients, is the time it takes. Like your set doesn't begin once you start deciding to put the weights in your hand.
Right. Yeah.
Like your set doesn't begin once your tushy hits that bench. Right.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
We're already working out, baby. No.
Yeah. None of that has
like
progressive overload.
Once you're down with the load in the muscle that you are trying to work, that's when you're working. That's when the set begins. So if you're talking about a squat bar and you've just put your phone down for 30 seconds and it takes you another 60 seconds to get under the bar, to get yourself situated, to put the weights on, whatever it is, well, now your 30-second rest is now 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And whatever intensity you were trying to build up into that workout, is diminishing because you're not playing the game the way it was designed in some regards.
Let's pause right there for just a second and say this. There's nothing inherently wrong with what just got described. If you want to take 2.5 minutes between your sets, that the intensity that you delivered really only requires you to rest for about 30 seconds. Okay, so what? Yeah, really, so what? Okay. All we're talking about here is when the desire for a certain outcome isn't matched by the efforts that you're putting forward. And that's applicable just kind of all over the place. Like when someone says, well, I'm not losing any weight. Well, are you in calorie deficit? Or I'm not gaining any weight. Okay, well, are you in calorie surplus? Well, I eat 9 million calories a day. Well, then you're not eating, then try 9.2 million calories a day. Like, you know,
Right.
there's no hall pass because of your perception. There's nothing wrong with looking at your phone, fine. But if you're expecting results as if you weren't looking at your phone, or if you weren't taking the time in between, or if you aren't matching the required devotion to your desired outcome, then that's where the problems start. And all we're talking about that being a problem is with your expectation regarding it. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's just if you want different shit and it's not happening, then something needs to be looked at.
You gotta do different shit.
You gotta do different shit. That's right. So with regard to focus and intensity, you had talked about two really important aspects, which are timing, cadence, and force, and then progressive overload, being the two things that you centered your focus and intensity around. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. Make sure I'm writing them down, make sure I'm thinking about them right. So when you say timing, am I understanding that to be like time of day, time when you're timing your workout?
Timing meaning, I believe the way that you would put it previously was the time of the day plus the time in between sets. And then there was the other type of timing that then you referred to as cadence.
Yeah, the tempo. Okay.
Yeah.
The way I'm kind of thinking about it then is like timing at the end of it, right? Is, you know, you can look at literature and you can get min max, all of this stuff.
Okay.
And that's fine and dandy, but at the end of it's like the best form of cardio. It's the one you're going to do.
Right.
So, you know, there's a lot of indications and studies that show that working out early in the morning is good. Like it's good for waking you up, getting positive hormones and systems in the body kicking. But, you know, if that's just not your, you know, your lot in life because of requirements, or you're just not a morning person, you got kids and dogs and work, and there's just no way you can get an hour workout in before the morning, like, okay. The end of it is more about getting it done, right? Now, as far as cadence or a tempo, right, you know, those are different ways to, you know, add variables and change one's workout without really having to change anything in some regards. So a tempo would be how long it takes us to bring the weight down, how long we hold it in that static position, and then how long we take to squeeze or push it or lift it back up to its original start position. And so you can play with that as being real quick. You can play with that being just kind of real grindy and slow, and then kind of everything in between. What I feel is the best advice for people is just doing the opposite of whatever you're doing. So a lot of people will find that they do reps pretty quickly. So just slowing down their reps will, again, change the intensity of their workout. It will allow them to focus on the workout a little differently as well. If you find that you're already a pretty kind of slow and grindy out kind of lifter or with your exercises, it probably benefits you to go a little quicker, to put a little bit more pop and speed to it, because that'll tax you in a different way. It'll bring a different intensity to the system. And with all that being said, you may have to change weight some. Sorry,
John, I feel like it needs to be said that when you said if you do find that you're kind of a slow lift, it also needs to have a caveat with it that makes sure that people understand very few people suffer from that.
Very few.
Very few. Yeah. Like it's, and if you think, oh yeah, that's me, chances are it's not.
So let's put some frames on this too,
Okay,
right? Because it's all relative. So when I say slow, I'm meaning something that's going to be like a 4-second eccentric. So again, if we're talking about a bench press, we're talking about taking about 4 seconds to take the bar from the top of the press down to the bottom of the lift. So as the way we kind of direct people to lift for chest press, it would be bringing the elbow to the midline of the rib cage, or just before the rib cage, The elbow passes the back of the rib cage. From that bottom position, then again, holding for about 2, maybe 3 seconds, keeping the contraction in the chest. And then after that 2 to 3 second pause, taking about 2 to 3 seconds to press it back up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
All said, one rep is going to take about 6 to 10 seconds. And then you're doing 10 to 15 of those. Or you could do something that's like 1 second of each. So 1 second down, 1 second pause, 1 second up. So now we're doing 3-second reps. If you're doing that 10 to 15 seconds, right now we're, 30 to 45 seconds.
What you just said also should be understood to be most beneficial when you are rehabilitating something or starting something new, right? So whatever weight that you're moving is tolerable for you to move in those amounts and at that speed. As you build skill, right? As you build
Absolutely.
skill. Go ahead.
And that's how it is the progression for any of these things. So progressive overload, right? You brought that up. Right. Progressive overload doesn't always mean necessarily having to be more weights on the bar, right? It can be a quicker rep. It can be a faster rep or a more explosive type of rep. It could be something like even a jump squat to some degree could be kind of a sense of a progressive overload. Now, again, the truest sense of progressive overload, right? You're doing the same movement and you're just challenging it with more weight or potentially more sets and reps. But you're just trying to get more squeeze out of the lemons, trying to get more fruit more juice from the fruit.
Well, and
without actually adding to it.
If you feel like a word for anyone who might be concerned about being able to go up in weight is that if you think about progressive overload, it can apply to basically all exercise, even types of exercise that never focus on or never include adding more resistance. So for instance, with running, if you're going for progressive overload because you want to get better at running, then you can do a couple of different things. One is to decrease the amount of time that you spend running the same distance, right? The other thing that you can do is to spend, and vice versa, like just to flip the coin, you can spend more time running the same distance, right? That'll challenge different shit slightly. But the other thing that you can do with no weight added is to try and run more distance in the same amount of time that you've allotted, right? No increase in weight. There's no, there's nothing there, right? You didn't put any weight on the bar, any additional weight on the bar, right? You just ran either further or faster or whatever. So
and more steps per hour.
Right. So you can get to progressive overload in a number of different ways without altering the amount of resistance that you're using. You had talked about earlier, just a moment ago, about tempo, and when we had discussed that previously, we were talking about how commonly when people, especially at the beginning of their workout journey, that doesn't mean that it goes away for some people later, because for many people it does not. There are a couple of ways that you can tell when someone's been going to the gym forever and has seen no change at all, right? There are a couple of ways that you can observe that workout and figure out why. And for people who have a difficult time achieving a goal, you might want to look at, before you even look at the weight that you're moving or the exercises that you're doing or whatever. You had talked about this, John, how you are behaving toward each set. Because as you put it, most people look at 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, right? 10 or 12 or 15 or whatever, right? Like it's, and so
we have this arbitrary number.
Yeah. And so whatever mythical force they can manifest in order to make that happen, whatever superheroic speedster force they can manage to get that set done as quickly as possible, they've now achieved their goal. And you said,
and no matter how they do it, right?
No, forget the safety. Who gives a shit about safety?
Well, not even safe. Well, yes, for sure, safety of the body and safety of the equipment. However, Well, you'll commonly see things like lat pull downs, right? People get something that's too heavy for them, and they gank it way up hard.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's too heavy for them, they let that weight come slamming down. And next thing you know, we've got a busted cable or a busted stack, and now no one can do lat pull downs.
Yeah, thanks. But you had said something about that, and I wrote that down as well, which is prevailing goal shouldn't be the number. The prevailing goal when performing any movement is the completion of the movement.
How we do
per movement.
Yep.
So per rep. And I remember after we talked about that, I started thinking like, what would it do to a person's approach if the information conveyed was said, we're doing 10 sets in groups of 3 because each rep is its own set. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Anyway,
well, not to get too far in the weeds, but there is a call it a form or a technique, cluster setting. And basically the whole premise of it is you take mini breaks in between each rep.
Mm-hmm.
And this is typically used for high strength training or high power training where you got to have a lot of gusto to go and you're really trying to push your boundaries. It's a little bit more of an advanced technique.
Mm-hmm.
But even in that regard, you could even still use the cluster set mentality for your basic sets, right? It's just this idea of, are we got the right stabilizing muscles engaged? And then are we utilizing the right prime movers to make the movement happen? And then is everything staying together through the movement, or are we losing something? Are we dropping things? It's kind of like if you've ever had too much laundry in the washer and you're trying to pull it all out in one go and throw it in the dryer. We have stackables at the house, right? So I got to dig all these clothes out of the bottom and try to pull them out, and then I try to like big man belly throw them into the dryer on top.
The boulder
and every
toss.
time I try to grab too much, all my clothes, like half my clothes, end up falling on the floor, right?
Well, that goes into something that we had talked about, that each time you're going to approach fitness or mobility, you have the option to make the choices that are best for you per time. And eliminate zealotry. So if today is chest day and you go to the gym, but for whatever reason you're feeling more like it's like, you're feeling a pinch in your shoulders, or you're feeling you've been sitting all day with one arm kind of belted across you, leaning on a table or something, so that pec is really tight. It might be better for you to do lats or shoulder, or especially your posterior shoulders. Eliminating that zealotry, that because this is what you're after, like you have to be extremely devoted to that decision that your past self made for your future self.
And the last thing I kind of say in that regard is, at the end of it, for the general population, for probably 80% of the gym goers out there who aren't necessarily working towards a competition type goal, the getting there, showing up to the gym, whether that's a home gym or it's your local neighborhood gym or whatever, like, that's the victory. Like, I can't express that enough. Like, you're really and truly, if you came in there and you wanted to work out chest and you get there and it's like you said, maybe it's your chest is feeling tight, or you're feeling something in the back of the shoulder blade, whatever it is, get there. But to your point, allow yourself the flexibility, allow yourself to audible to what you need in the moment, because you're still going to progress. You're still going to, you're giving yourself, your future self especially, the opportunity to do the chest workout that it couldn't do today. And that if you did do today, you're not going to be able to do tomorrow. Metaphorically tomorrow, I guess, not necessarily literal tomorrow.
Right.
But and again, that is the end of it, right? Like, I feel in the nuts and the bolts of it is, it's getting in there, trying to do some little bit of work. Whether it's, if you want to get 10 reps, but you can only get 5 really good ones, you take a break and you come back and get another 3, and then you get another 2, however it is. But you just adjust the goalpost as appropriate for where you're at.
Right.
And that way it's still a challenge.
Right. So if your focus and your intensity, interestingly, if they are on your intention or they exist solely in your intention, then you can actually serve to decrease the amount of efficiency that you experience when actually physically performing whatever.
Yeah.
Right. If in one way, if you think about it, it's kind of like over engineering a solution, right? Like I joke with my wife all the time about how I'm the person that would, if somebody said, "Oh, this when we're in space and this ink doesn't when I'm trying to write and there's no gravity, the ink," and I would be like the first person to like spend $1 billion trying to develop like gravity affected ink when
versus a pencil,
right? When someone else could we'll just use a pencil, like. Or or some chalk or whatever, wax like grease pen or something. That would work just fine. So when you try and when you over engineer your focus and intensity, especially in the realm of intention, you can actually decrease your efficiency and understand that your efficiency is in the long term going to be less a product of your focus and intensity and more a product of your experience, how to do things smarter. And develop relationships between activities that are more meaningful for those activities as a whole.
If you stayed around this long, give us a thumbs up, a like, share, and if you would, comment on any of your time thieves in the gym, things that maybe make you less efficient or take away from your intensity and focus.
On the other side of that coin, what are some things that you've done to ensure that you can maintain intensity and focus? I know plenty of people who, no matter what the temperature is, they will walk into that gym, or even if it's at home, they'll put on a hoodie, throw the hood on with some headphones.
Yep.
I know one person who works out in sunglasses. They don't want anything about them inviting any kind of distraction at all.
And you know what? That's why we stay mindful as fuck.
And don't compensate.